there has not been the Uber of law, but I think law firms have to preempt the drive towards a new model. And so I think as a law firm, you have to really be on the lookout for the model that is going to disrupt the current model radically.
Hi and welcome to another episode of the LegalTech Podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking about an exciting topic, namely how law firms are changing to meet the challenges of tech. And for this, I'm joined by former CEO of Clifford Applied Solutions and legal industry veteran, Jeroen Plink. Jeroen, welcome to the show and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Jeroen, you studied law at Leiden University a little while before I did. But after you studied law at Leiden Law School, you went on to become a lawyer at Clifford Chance in the Amsterdam office. Why did you decide to become a lawyer, and what was your area of practice back then?
When I started to study law, I didn't plan on becoming a lawyer, but I'd done an internship during my time in Leiden and really enjoyed it. I thought it was a natural extension of my studies, and it would put me up in a good position to have a good career. So I did predominantly private equity law in the first period, and then I moved to litigation, where I had a great time with Jeroen Ouwehand, who's now the senior partner at Clifford Chance, and we actually set up the thriving e-commerce practice at the time. This was hot during the dot-com bubble, and then returned to private equity after that, having spent half a year at Latham & Watkins as a secondee lawyer. So, but it's mostly been private equity in that first time at Clifford Chance.
Very, very interesting. Now, you also didn't stay in the legal practice as a lawyer for very long, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I think you moved on to start your own company, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I co-founded the company with a former colleague, Jeremy Tobias Tarsh. And we set out to innovate the legal due diligence process, which is quite a centrifugal process, and it's quite wasteful because you research a bunch of documents for the purpose of a transaction, and then the results of that review is not being used afterwards. So we built a whole technology application aimed at solving that problem. Great idea, terrible timing. We launched our product in early 2002, just after 9/11 had happened, and the bubble had burst, and law firms were not investing in technology, and let alone in technology in M&A. So the timing was not great, but we had a real fun time developing that product. The outcome was really successful, as we ended up selling the company to Practical Law Company.
Yeah, I can imagine, and definitely also want to hear more about this adventure and also the steps that came after that. But maybe before doing that, because we're talking here about an unexplored field, and this is the field of legal tech, and I guess at the time that really wasn't even anything big at all. And over the time, the landscape really has changed. What did the legal innovation landscape look like back then, and what are some of the great developments that you've seen since that moment?
Yeah, it's. I think a lot of things have changed for the better. A lot of things have stayed the same. So if you look at, for example, just about the things that stayed the same, I was talking to a friend of mine who was the partner responsible for technology at a fairly large UK firm, and we were talking the other day, and we came to the conclusion that as far as basic technology, not much has changed. The tech stack is very much similar to what it was 20, 25 years ago in law firms. So you still have your productivity suite, Microsoft Word, you've got a document management system, a billing system, an intake system, and in many firms, it's still the old systems that were in place like 20 years ago. So that part is actually, I think it's holding back firms significantly, and it's exposing them to some threats. On the positive side, things we were hoping 20 years ago would be there at one point in time are now reality. When I started my company, the logistics that was focused on building the due diligence tool, we had a very old school approach. Automated, content rich checklist that somehow created a report. Now you've got tools like Kira and others that use artificial intelligence, and you feed systems like that, like tens of thousands of documents, and you get almost instantaneously more accurate summaries of the agreements, more accurate than lawyers would do in a fraction of the time. So I think that is terrific and very positive news. And I think there are many examples of where the landscape has moved. So for another example is time writing software. When I practiced in the mid 90s, you would fill out your paper timesheet that you would give to your secretary, who would then enter it into the system. And you now got tools on the market like Ping and Zero that basically, based on what you're doing on your computer or your phone, capture time automatically without skipping a beat. And so that process has improved significantly. It's now a matter of getting firms and lawyers to adopt it.
Yeah, exactly. So could you say that they are maybe a bit hesitant in adopting this technology?
I think it's as with anything, it's a combination of different factors. The one thing I've always objected to is the "but lawyers are different" argument. I think what we're trying to do with legal technology is hard. Getting software and business change adopted is probably the hardest and most misunderstood process. Lawyers are not that different from other knowledge workers. If you change a process or implement a software and you have a poor implementation process or ignore change management, or you have a product that is not easy to implement, you have challenges no matter what industry you're in. Of course, we are as lawyers are different because we're trained to find the flaws. We're skeptical. There's still too large a contingent of lawyers that are almost proud of their technical incompetence instead of ashamed. But I don't think they explain all of the slow adoption rates. I think one of the things that is very important for adoption is push from the top. You have to use technology X. I think the other thing that has driven adoption is something called what I call circumstance-driven need, and I think COVID was probably the biggest impetus for change in 30 years in law firms, and all of a sudden even partners appeared on cameras in conference calls where that was unthinkable before that. And I think the other thing that's crucial to implement is show clear evidence of the benefits of a particular solution. Again, I think that's all similar in other industries. I would say if you want to get a tool adopted, have a good implementation plan, budget for adoption. All too often, you see a firm just focusing on the cost for licenses of software instead of also allocating funds to the rollout and the implementation. Measure and be willing to change and adapt. I mean, the way I think about innovation in law firms is it's about three different horizons. So the first horizon being doing more efficiently what your current type of work. It's no longer feasible or desirable to send armies of junior lawyers at reviewing documents in a due diligence exercise. Clients don't expect it, and with the increased volume of documents that you have to go through in a transaction, it's virtually impossible to do that. So there is a whole swath of work to be done in improving the current way of working. I think there's a second horizon in my mind, which is about creating alternative revenue streams. I think it's not going to remain the same as it ever was in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think law firms have to realize that there is a need for different revenue streams in addition to traditional legal advice. And then the third is it's going to be disrupted. If it's not being disrupted, this would be the only industry where there is high profit margins, where there's no entrant that new entrant is looking at and say, I want myself a piece of that profitable business. It's inevitable. There have been some attempts, some have failed, and others are looking better. There has not been the Uber of law, but I think law firms have to preempt the drive towards a new model. And so I think as a law firm, you have to really be on the lookout for the model that is going to disrupt the current model radically.
Yes, exactly. And I think this will obviously also be maybe the question for at least the coming decade on how, what the future of probably law firms will even be. But there was also obviously a time when this wasn't even a discussion yet, because nobody ever thought, I think, back maybe 20 plus years ago that anything like this would happen. Now, maybe linking back to what we were talking about before about your career transition and also your first foray into legal tech, because the company you established was acquired by Practical Law in 2002, if I'm not mistaken, after which you also started working at Practical Law. Why these moves from maybe in particular, or maybe from both of you? Because I can imagine that back then, acquiring a legal tech business was quite risky.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was a deal made in heaven. We had a great product, a great idea, partially led by entrepreneurial hubris. We'd come up with the product, and we survived as long as we did, but there was no light at the end of the tunnel. So Practical Law was really the white knight. For Practical Law, the reasoning behind making the acquisition was twofold. One is they did realize that technology is the way of the future, and so that was the first impetus. And then the second part was they were really looking for visionary talent, and I think they did. Now it would be called an acqui-hire. Do an acquisition to hire some young blood. I think they did a great job there. I ended up setting up the US operation. Jeremy ended up managing the London editorial team. So I think they did a good job in making that hire.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you also became CEO of Practical Law US. Now, what did the US legal landscape look like back then? Was it similar to the one in Europe?
No, it's quite different. I mean, my perception of the U.S. legal market is that the in-house legal departments are further ahead on a trajectory of innovation than the U.S. law firms, whereas in the UK and Europe it's reversed. The law firms are really leading the way, and they're miles ahead of their U.S. peers and of in-house legal departments. And in the UK and Europe, the in-house legal departments are not as advanced as some of the law firms are.
Okay, so the market reaction was probably a lot better than if you would have started it somewhere else in Europe.
It's selling water in the desert. Was what selling PLC felt like. The problem, and I think most people recognize it, when you come out of law school, most associates look like deer in the headlight. Law school does not prepare you well for practice. practical law really helped lawyers with their first steps. And I mean, now there's generations of lawyers that grew up on PLC in the UK, but now also in the US. And helping those deer in the headlight was very gratifying and badly needed.
Yeah. Yeah, legal practice has really become so much more than just, knowing the law, and that was already the case before, but maybe now even more than ever.
I think the biggest problem is, well, I think it lives at a few different levels. So, and it has nothing to do with technology per se. I think law schools do a decent job at delivering people who understand the law, but the practice of law is something completely different. Having done however many years of law school in whatever jurisdiction you're doing it in, doesn't prepare you for how to actually do litigation. What does an M&A transaction look like? What are the commercial points? I think that is a skills gap that exists, and it exists at every level of legal practice, whether you work for an international firm that does M&A law or for a small firm and you do criminal law. You don't know how to take a deposition or how to negotiate a stock purchase agreement when you come out of law school. I don't expect that to change, but I think there ought to be some things that should change. I think the other point, and again, it's a major hobby horse of mine, is the lack of technology skills. It's no longer the case that the computer screen is another light on one's desk for most people, but I still see partners who um, send documents to their secretaries to print. There's still a fear of Excel and PowerPoint. It always strikes me as the carpenter who's almost proud that he doesn't know how to use a hammer, kind of thing. So that is something that ought to change. And then at sort of at mid level, I think there's a serious gap on skills. There's too many people that don't really understand how law firm IT works, how law firm marketing works. What is digital marketing, and how do you do business development in a digital age? What are the commercial drivers of client? And I'm fortunate that I've had exposure to a firm where this is important, understanding the business drivers, but it's not the case everywhere.
Maybe looking at a law firm that is obviously pretty well known for its investment, both in terms of obviously money, but also in terms of time. Building up, I guess, a future-proof company is, for example, Clifford Chance. Now, you also worked at Clifford Chance. You were the CEO at Clifford Chance Applied Solutions. What is the structure and what is its mission?
I was really fortunate to get the opportunity to work on Clifford Chance Applied Solutions. I'd sort of we sold Practical Law to Thomson Reuters in 2013, and I've been investing and advising a number of legal technology companies. And I realized I was ready to do a big thing again. And I ran into Bas Boris Visser, who's the global head of innovation at Clifford Chance, and we started talking. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the fact that if you want to be successful as a law firm in digital innovation, you need to research what I call a second horizon opportunities. What are different ways than your traditional advice on how to make revenue? So what we're building, or what we were building, is in a separate unit, a series of digital solutions that we can sell to clients that help clients with their legal challenges through technology. It's a bit similar to what McKinsey built. 12 years ago when they built McKinsey Solutions. They realized it was not just about human-based consultancy, but what do you do when you don't have a matter for a client that still keeps you on their radar? So in Clifford Chance Solutions, we try to help clients with their legal problems on a more ongoing basis than just when they have a need for lawyers.
Does Clifford Transply Solutions also develop legal tech products for law firms or only for clients?
Um, no, it's uniquely focused on clients or on companies. I want to say it's not necessarily just the clients of Clifford Chance. Pretty much any company that has a need for legal services in an automated way.
What would you say that makes a great product or a great tech product, and what makes it really sellable?
It has to solve a genuine problem for the lawyer. You have to have demonstrable benefits in order to sell it. There has to be a very clear business need, and you have to be able to sell that business need rather than anything else. I mean, we've been talking primarily about the development part of products, but there's so much more than that. You can have the best product, but if you don't have a process for selling it, it falls flat on its face. For me, the part after product development is probably the bigger part and the more important part.
I might have listened to the podcast that you were on, I think a little while back now, on Law Next. And relating to this, one of the things I really found interesting what you said is that maybe another aspect is also the people that are behind it. And that you really have what I really found a brilliant statement, a strict zero asshole policy. Um, but looking at this, like the people are obviously important, and I take it that lawyers, in that sense, are also really important in this process, in a sense, or at least legal professionals, with regard to their knowledge and understanding of how the law works. Where do they come into the picture in developing such a product, and how, I guess, how is their knowledge used?
So in the Clifford Child Supply Solutions products, it is very important because those products basically take the knowledge of the lawyers in the firm and combine that with technology. So it is absolutely critical that the team at Clifford Chance Supply Solutions leveraged that. The fact that a lawyer, however, thinks that something is a good idea for a product is probably not always right. They're really good at legal advice, but many lawyers are not so good at defining what makes a good product, let alone selling it. I was talking to one of my peers the other day who said that yes, lawyers need good technology, but boy, do they need the skills to sell their services and any products even more than new technology. And as you said about the zero asshole policy, I really stand by that. I'm fortunately in a stage of my career that I'm realizing that the life is too short for working with people who don't treat everyone with the same level of respect. And so you might be a really good salesperson, but if you behave like an asshole, there's no place for you in my organization.
We've been talking about tech products, in particular legal tech products. Now, obviously, there is already a lot of legal tech out there. You already touched upon the fact that law firms, in a sense, are perhaps a little bit, lacking in certain respects. What is really a tech product that you would say that law firms need to have, or something they really need to change now, basically?
Could give a slightly different slant on that question. I think you started your question with there's already a lot of legal tech out there. I think the biggest problem in our market is that there's no transparency. I was talking to someone the other day responsible for buying software solutions for their firm, and it's a big firm. Um, they switched from software package A to software package B, and I asked them, so what did you consider? She goes, I looked at A, B, and C, and I asked, so what do you think about software package D, E, F, and G? Turns out that they'd heard of package D but discarded it, but had no idea about E, F, and G. And so here's someone making a 100,000 or a few $100,000 dollar decision per year without full knowledge of the market. And so I think that is the biggest gap in the market is why do you choose software package A over software package B? Are you even aware that there is a software package C on the market that also tries to address the same pain point? I think that in transparency is a major flaw for law firms and in-house legal departments alike.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because what came to, or at least was my impression, I worked very shortly at a legal tech startup, and after that, I really got interested in the field of legal tech. And one thing that really captured my attention was the vast amount of products out there, but you didn't like many of the products offered roughly this either the same type of service, same type of product, but all a bit wrapped into some kind of different or special packaging that made it, or at least in theory, different. Very difficult also then for people to understand what the differences are, what the products out there are. But what it kind of reminded me, and maybe I'm totally wrong in this, is that it maybe looks a bit like the .com bubble that we had in the in the early 2000s, end of the last century. But then for legal tech, do you think we're heading in that direction in terms of all these products out there, but a lack of transparency and
I think there's some sign of a bubble. At the time we're recording this, you're looking at VC venture capital investments into legal tech solutions with 50, 50 to 60 times revenue as the valuation. That is not sustainable. And I don't think they're good for anyone, not for the VCs, not for the companies, and certainly not good for the legal tech industry. I think this frothiness is not just limited to legal tech, but it's a bubble in most industries in tech. I think there's too much cash that is chasing too few good opportunities. I think it's different than in the .com bubble because there's actually in many cases some real substance. So, for example, if you're looking at the the contract lifecycle management space, yes, it's fragmented. There are too many players, but that too will shake out and there will be a consolidation. And it's solving such a big problem. It's one of the conclusions I've reached after having been in this space for almost 25 years. To me, it is mind-numbing to consider the fact that there are still so many companies out there with a total lack of understanding what's hidden in their contracts. I mean, that's what started the global financial crisis, is all these toxic financial instruments that the banks were not aware of. It's not very dissimilar, and there's so much unlocked value that's hidden in contracts, and I think that needs to be brought out. So there's substance. There's a real need for change and for improvement, and there's companies that are making a real difference. But are the valuations out of whack? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, in terms of investment, where do you think we'll be heading then in the next couple of years to decades?
I think innovation is here to stay. I think law firms will have to undergo a digital transformation, as do most companies, whether in the professional services industry or in normal industries. We're going to have to change. And as I said before, also, there will be disruption. At the moment, we're still protected as a legal industry by the old guild rules of you can only give legal advice if you are a bar admitted lawyer. That will go. It's, in my opinion, it's the biggest nonsense, and it's one of the biggest barriers to solving probably what's our biggest societal issue, in my opinion, and that is the lack of access to justice. I think access to justice can be fixed. I think technology has a role to play. I think deregulation has a role to play, and that's going to have to.
That's definitely going to have quite an impact. And I guess, like you said, the future will only tell. And now we're actually talking about the future. You are no longer the CEO of Clifford Applied Solutions. What are your plans for the future? What's up next?
I bore people with that on a daily basis. I aspire to fix. I've got a few things in mind on that. So the one part is I really want to see what I can do in access to justice. I believe strongly that access to justice is not a charitable case, but I think we can get people better access to justice whilst making it a commercial proposition. So that's one part of it. The second part is I've been in the legal tech industry, and I've probably been one of the oldest people in legal tech. I haven't been in it for over 20 years now, and I'm hoping that we can clear up this haziness in the market and make it a little bit more transparent and a little bit clearer what is what, and why should you buy X over Y, and what problem does this solution solve? That is, I think it's important, and there's no one who currently does that.
Yeah, so definitely no ambitions to go back into the legal practice as a lawyer.
No, not as a lawyer. You wouldn't want me as your lawyer. That's for sure.
Either way, I wish you the best of luck with all these things that you're planning on doing, and I'm intrigued to see what the changes will be in maybe 20 years from now. Who knows? For now, at least, thank you so much for being on the show. I think I got some really interesting insights.
Same here. I really enjoyed this podcast. Thank you very much. Your questions were extremely insightful and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Law of Tech podcast. If you want to make sure you keep up to date with the show and never miss out on an episode, be sure to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and follow the Law of Tech on social media. If you enjoyed the show, please give it a rating or review, as it helps others discover the show, and don't forget to share it with your network. For now, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Law of Tech podcast.